You know this man. He can work a room full of white folks so smooth you'd swear he was raised in it, easy laugh, firm handshake, the right joke landing at the right second. But watch him later, alone in the car, shoulders finally dropping 2 inches, jaw finally unclenching like he just unstrapped a vest made of steel. That's not tired from the meeting, that's tired from the performance. He's been doing it since he was 9 years old. By now he doesn't feel the weight of it anymore. He only notices the absence when it's finally gone. Every Black Gen X man you've ever loved has a version of that ride home. Ask him about it directly and watch him laugh it off, because laughing it off is armor too. Stay with me, because this isn't a story about a man who doesn't like white people. This is a story about a man who wants real friendship, real trust, a real seat at somebody's table without an interview attached to it, and can't quite figure out how to get there. That's the part nobody talks about. Wanting connection and knowing how to survive turned out to be 2 different skills, and this man mastered the second one so well it started blocking the first. Now here's what nobody tells you about that switch he flips. It wasn't born in him, and his mama didn't hand it to him in the delivery room. That armor was built the same way you'd build a house for a hurricane season that never really ends. He didn't wake up one morning and decide to be careful around white folks. Somebody taught him, a father, an uncle, an officer with his hand resting near his belt, a teacher with a clipboard and a raised eyebrow, and he only had to pay the price for forgetting the lesson once or twice before he never forgot it again. Let me bring this back around, because that lesson is the whole engine of everything you're about to see. A whole generation of men learned a survival skill so well that it started running their entire life, including the parts that were supposed to feel safe. Picture him at work, 9:15 on a Tuesday, walking into a meeting where he's the only black face at the table. Watch his voice climb half an octave, watch his laugh get a little quicker on the draw, watch him agree with the boss's golf story he has zero interest in. That's not an act, whatever it looks like from the outside. That's a man doing math in real time, calculating exactly how much of himself is safe to bring into that room today. He'll crack the joke before anybody can make him the joke. He'll be twice as prepared as the next man so nobody can say he didn't earn his seat, and he'll do it so effortlessly that his coworkers will never once clock the labor underneath it. You ever notice how some men are the cool one at every job they've ever had? Cool isn't always temperament. Sometimes cool is a uniform a man puts on at 8 in the morning and takes off at 6, and he's been wearing it so long the seams feel like his own skin now. Picture him at pickup line, 3:15, waiting on his daughter outside a school where he's one of 4 black fathers in the whole parking lot. A white mother waves him over, tells him they're doing a cul-de-sac cookout Saturday, tells him bring the family, genuinely means it. He'll smile, say we'll see how the weekend looks. He already knows he's not going, and he knew it before she finished the sentence. It's not that he thinks she's lying. It's that he's run this exact scenario before, and somewhere between the invitation and the driveway sits a version of Saturday where he's suddenly the only one who has to explain himself, and he'd rather skip the whole equation than risk landing on that answer again. Now sit with that for a second, because that's not paranoia. A man doesn't build a whole architecture of caution off one bad afternoon. He built it off a pattern, tested across decades, confirmed enough times that the caution became cheaper than the hope. Picture him pulled over on a 2-lane road at 10 at night, hands at 10 and 2, already reciting the script his father drilled into him before he ever had a license. Yes sir, no sir, hands where he can see them, don't reach for anything until you're told. His heart is doing 110 while his voice stays a flat, practiced calm. That's the same voice he'll use in Monday's meeting. That's the same voice he'll use at the cul-de-sac cookout if he ever goes, because the flat, practiced calm that keeps him alive on the road became the flat, practiced calm that keeps him safe everywhere else. His body never learned there was supposed to be a difference. Picture him back at the barbershop Saturday morning, telling the fellas about the white guy at work who keeps trying to get lunch with him. The room goes quiet for half a second, then somebody laughs and says, "Watch yourself," and everybody nods like scripture just got read. That's not the room being cynical for sport. That's a room full of men who have each got their own version of a friend who turned into a stranger the second something got real, comparing notes the way soldiers compare terrain. He'll laugh along with them, and part of that laugh is real relief. Finally, a room where he doesn't have to explain the math. And part of that laugh is a door quietly closing on a friendship that might have actually been worth the risk. Picture him at the kitchen table with his wife long after the kids are asleep, and she's asking why he won't just let Marcus from work come to the barbecue already. He gives her 3 reasons that all sound reasonable, and none of them are the real one. The real one is harder to say out loud. If he lets Marcus all the way in and Marcus turns out to be like the others, he doesn't just lose a friend, he loses a little more of his own willingness to ever try again. And he's already running low on that particular currency, so he'd rather keep what's left in the bank. Let me bring this back around one more time, because 5 different rooms and one man wearing the same armor in every single one of them is not a coincidence. That's a system working exactly as it was built to work, and it was built a long, long time before he was born. Picture him at 11 years old in the back seat of his daddy's Buick, getting the talk for the first time, not the one about girls, the other one, about what to do with his hands if blue lights ever showed up behind them. His father's voice stayed calm and even the whole way through, which scared him more than yelling would have, because calm meant his daddy had rehearsed this speech before, maybe even needed it himself once. That's the moment the blueprint got handed down, quiet as a Sunday afternoon, no ceremony to it at all. He didn't get his daddy's watch or his daddy's name passed to him that night. He got his daddy's radar, tuned and ready, whether he wanted it or not. Go back further than his own memory, back to a plantation where the wrong facial expression could cost a man his life, and you'll find the first blueprint for that same radar. Enslaved people learned to read a white face for danger the way sailors read a sky for weather, because getting it wrong wasn't a bad grade, it was a beating, or worse. That skill didn't disappear when slavery ended, because the danger didn't disappear either. Jim Crow just rewrote the rules and kept the stakes, say sir, look down, cross the street. Never let your success show too loud in front of the wrong audience. And a black man who mastered those rules got to keep his life, his job, sometimes his family. Then came the Great Migration, millions of families leaving southern fields for northern factories, trading one set of survival rules for a new city's unwritten version of the same test. The test changed shape, but it never stopped being a test. Fast forward to the fathers and uncles of the men we're talking about, and you hit deindustrialization. The factory jobs that once let a black man provide without ever having to charm a single white gatekeeper started disappearing through the 70s and 80s. Suddenly survival required more performing, not less, because the steady paycheck that used to buy a little independence had dried up. Then the 80s and 90s arrived with their own particular cruelty. Crack moved through black neighborhoods like a fire through dry grass, and the government's answer wasn't treatment. It was handcuffs, mandatory minimums, and a prison boom that pulled fathers, brothers, and uncles out of Gen X households by the hundreds of thousands. A boy growing up in that decade didn't need a lecture to learn that white-run institutions, courts, police, sometimes the evening news, could take his people away and rarely give them back. He absorbed that lesson through his own front window, and he carried it into every white face he'd meet for the rest of his life, fair or not. This is the part where a man named Sherman James becomes useful, because he gave this exhaustion a name back in the 70s, studying black men in the rural South. He called it John Henryism, the drive to meet every obstacle with maximum effort and iron self-control. And he found that the men who did it best paid for it later, in blood pressure numbers that told the truth their faces never would. Du Bois had already given us the deeper architecture of it decades before that. This business of always measuring yourself through someone else's eyes while still trying to hold onto your own. He called it double consciousness, and it's still living in the body of every black Gen X man who's ever walked into a room and instantly clocked how he's being read before he said a single word. None of this is ancient history to him. Either this is his father's story, and often his own childhood, close enough to touch. Gen X men were the children who watched all of it happen in real time on the evening news and on their own block. And then grew up and had to go find work in a world, still run mostly by the people their whole life had trained them to read for danger first and trust second. Now here's where you have to slow down and give this man his due, because everything you just heard sounds like a wound, and it is one. But it's also a tool, sharpened across generations, and it worked. The armor got him hired when a rawer version of himself might have gotten passed over. The calm voice got him home alive from traffic stops that ended very differently for other men. The careful reading of a room kept him employed through recessions that swallowed less careful men whole, and it earned him a reputation as the person everybody wanted on their team, in every room he ever walked into. Richard Majors and Janet Mancini Bilson had a name for this too, when they studied black men navigating exactly this kind of pressure. They called it cool pose, a proud, controlled performance of calm and strength, built to say, I am still a man in a world determined to say otherwise. And his version of it has been keeping that exact promise since he was a boy in the back seat of a Buick. Call it a mask if you want, but a mask that keeps a man fed, employed, and breathing is not a costume. It's a tool, passed down like granddaddy's hammer, heavy but exactly the right weight for the job it was built to do. He didn't inherit weakness from the men who came before him. He inherited a survival technology, refined across 400 years of trial and very costly error, and he's been using it exactly the way it was designed to be used. Respect that before you judge it. Now let's lighten this up for a second, because the man himself would tell you with a laugh, because everything's funnier with a laugh attached, that he's got two phone voices. There's the one he uses with his mama, and there's the one he uses when the number on the screen has a corporate area code, and if you called him back to back on both, you'd swear two different men picked up. His wife calls it the customer service voice, and she's not wrong, and he knows she's not wrong, and he still can't turn it off even when he's just ordering a pizza. Ask any black man his age about the phone voice and watch him grin before he even answers, because some truths are easier to admit with a smile already loaded. But here's the turn, and it's a heavier one, so stay with me. A tool built for constant use eventually starts to cost more than it saves, the same way a body built for constant sprinting eventually breaks down faster than a body that got to walk sometimes. Sherman James saw it show up as blood pressure. Doctors today see it show up as heart disease, as diabetes, as a body that's been on high alert for 40 years straight and never got the memo that the danger sometimes actually passed. Ask his doctor if he'll even go. Black Gen X men see doctors less than almost anyone else in this country, and you already know why. The same hypervigilance that once protected him from a billy club now quietly protects him from a blood pressure cuff. Because somewhere along the way, walking into any institution that could judge him started to feel like the same kind of risk, whether it's a police station or a doctor's office. But the cost isn't only medical, it's relational, and this is the part that hurts most to say out loud. A man who spends his whole life reading rooms for danger eventually loses the ability to simply be in a room, and that includes rooms full of people who genuinely love him and never meant him any harm at all. Marcus from work might have been real. That white neighbor with the cul-de-sac cookout might have been real too, and somewhere in a life spent testing every hand before shaking it, this man may have let real ones walk past him along with the fake ones. because from the outside they look identical until it's too late to tell the difference. His wife feels it as distance even when he's sitting right across from her. His kids feel it as a father who can build a fortress around anyone outside the family, but sometimes forgets to lower the drawbridge even for them, because 40 years of practice doesn't know how to stop just because it finally got home safe. And the bill comes due quietly, the way most bills that matter do. It shows up as a slow accumulation of friendships that never got to happen, invitations that never got accepted, and a loneliness that can live inside a man even when his house is full of people who love him. Now here's the compassionate truth, and I need you to actually receive it instead of just hearing it. None of this makes him foolish, and none of it makes him broken. It makes him a man who adapted brilliantly to a world that gave him very few other options. An adaptation that's smart doesn't deserve your pity. But intelligence that served him at 20 doesn't automatically serve him at 50. And a tool that once saved his life can start quietly taking pieces of it instead. The goal was never to walk through the world with zero armor. No man with any sense does that, and no man with any sense should. The goal is smaller and more specific than that, and it's this: he doesn't need to drop the mask everywhere, but he needs at least one place where he can set it down completely. One room, one relationship, one porch, one person who's proven, not promised, proven, over real time and small tests, that they can be trusted with the man underneath the performance. That safe place might be a marriage. It might be a therapist's office, or 3 friends from the old neighborhood who have known him since he was 12. And none of those choices require him to trust every coworker or every cul-de-sac neighbor equally, because trust was never supposed to be an all-or-nothing switch anyway. Real connection with someone outside his own experience doesn't require him to hand over the armor on day one, either. It asks for something slower and smaller. Notice who shows up consistently, not just who talks the friendliest, who stays after the joke isn't funny anymore, who defends him when he's not in the room, who asks a second time when he says maybe to the cookout. That kind of proof doesn't arrive in a single grand gesture, and it was never going to. It arrives in 10 small moments a person probably won't even remember choosing to do right. And those 10 small moments, stacked over a couple of years, are worth more than 100 invitations extended with good intentions and no follow-through. And here's one more practical piece of it, plain as they come. He doesn't have to explain 400 years of history to a new friend just to justify why trust takes him longer than it takes other people. He can simply say, I move slow with new folks. Let that be the whole explanation, and let the friendship prove itself instead of demanding he prove his caution first. He gets to test the water without diving in head first, and that's not cowardice. That's the same wisdom that's kept him alive his whole life, just aimed at a gentler target now. Let him take the second lunch with Marcus. Let him say yes to the cookout one time, watch how it goes, and decide about the next one from there. One data point was never supposed to be enough to trust an entire stranger, and it was never supposed to be enough to permanently rule one out either. If you know this man, if you married him, if you raised him, if you are him, hear this clearly. The wall he built is not evidence that something is wrong with him. It's evidence that he survived something real, with a mind sharp enough to build exactly what the moment required. You are not asking him to be reckless when you ask him to let somebody in. You're asking him to slowly, carefully, on his own timeline, extend the same discernment that kept him alive toward a future that might actually deserve it. That's not weakness, and it never was. That's a man deciding, one small test at a time, that survival was never supposed to be the whole story. Connection was always supposed to be the reward waiting on the other side of it. Before you go, sit with this one last thing. Every wall a man builds gets built for a reason, but a wall doesn't know when the war is over. Only the man standing behind it does, and only when he finally decides to look up and check.